Hello guys, welcome to another video. I'm trying something a little bit different today. I'm going to try a little story time type video because they're easy to make. And obviously it's going to create a hopefully very entertaining end product, but also the other thing. So yeah, anyway, this is a story of how I manufactured my own seat post with 3D printing because I wanted it to be inline. So start the story. Joined Vitas for 2019. Cool bikes. And so here's the thing. My position, I have my saddles generally quite far forward because I like to reduce the hip angle, which I guess like if it's further back, it's more like this. Further forward, you open up that hip angle, and I find I feel a lot better on the bike with a more open hip angle. So yeah, I usually ride the saddle quite far forward. The seat-posts on the Vitas happen to have quite a lot more setback. Well, not a huge amount, but a couple centimeters more setback than what I'd been riding before. So, I was riding, or I think it was more, is 3 or 4 centimeters more setback than what I'd been used to. So, yeah, the position for me, I was struggling to get comfy, especially if I was trying to get aero, because obviously the more aero you are, the more bent over your hip angle. It just, yeah. So, I was struggling, I'm not gonna lie, and I don't think I had any results apart from on the track bike, but that bike was obviously a different bike. Yeah, so it wasn't getting any results. I was getting a little bit frustrated, so I was like, okay, what can I do? Having a different saddle at that point wasn't really an option. So we actually tried a few things. Me and my dad, trying a few different things to try and solve a solution. There's this thing called a suspension saddle rail. We used that because the clamp allowed 2 sets of rails to go through. So we tried to use a bit of rail and extend it forward. That didn't work. At one point I was thinking about trying to weld a bit of rail onto the back of the saddle, because that would be a really neat solution. Wouldn't notice it, but unfortunately it's beyond my capabilities, even though we do have a welder, but that would have been so hard to line it up just right and then weld it. So what we eventually came up with, which I didn't even use in the end because it was a bit sketchy, was this. Which is probably the least elegant solution I could have come up, but I didn't really want to spend a lot of money on it just in case it didn't work or something like that, or just in case it wasn't allowed either, because I knew I didn't, you have to be careful with sponsors and stuff. Anyway, so I made this, and I'll put a picture on what it looked like on the seat post, and essentially this bolted directly onto the current seat post mount, and then this hole we had like another seat post clamp, or it actually came from a suspension saddle clamp, but we just stole the clamp from the rail clamp, and we bolted that to this, and we used these little holes for pins. It didn't work that, like, you had to make sure it was exactly straight, because it could, it had wobble, the pins weren't perfect. And it kind of worked, to be fair, but as you can see, it looked a bit terrible. Although, in my defense, when you're sitting on the bike, you wouldn't notice it at all. Like, it was pretty good. And if we painted it black, then I think it would have been fine, to be fair. We just should have painted it black before asking permission. Because anyway, long story short, we weren't allowed to use it because it was a bit garish. So, fair enough. New solution. I was like, okay, let's try and manufacture a whole inline seat post, because that just takes out the whole setback seat post problem, and it shouldn't look too bad, right? So what I did, I drew around the old seat post on a piece of paper to get the profile, because it's this profile, which aero seat posts don't really have a standard. You definitely can't look up the dimensions, and I can't remember if I asked the company Vitas for the dimensions of their seat post, but I don't think I did. I think it would have been a bit sketchy anyway. They probably would have been reluctant. So anyway, I drew around it on a piece of paper. I know, very professional. Then I put it through my printer to scan it. So then you get the flat view, as opposed to if you take a picture, it might not. The shape gets distorted a little bit. And then I measured it with calipers, because I didn't realize this when I did it, but when you scan things, the scaling isn't maintained. So I had to get the calipers, measure with both dimensions, just to make sure I could get it the exact right. It was like, to 0.1 millimeters. And then I made it into a vector graph, so it's just one line. Put a hole in the middle, put a gap in the back so it can close, because I didn't know how much play there'd be in the clamp. Yeah, I imported that into Blender, extruded it out to like 10 centimeters, because I thought that should be enough to get some good grip in the thing. And then at first it was only going to be 2 centimeters, and then I realized it would be able to wobble a bit, and which wouldn't be a good idea. So I think this is like 10 centimeters. Yeah, so I extruded it out, because obviously it needs to grip, and I didn't know. So I put a little gap on the back of like a couple mil, well, I didn't have a 3D printer at the time, so I sent it to some website or whatever to get it 3D printed. It wasn't that expensive, to be fair. Here was the other issue. This is like the most narrow seat post you can get, because that's all that would fit. And if you look really carefully, there's barely any edge. There's not a lot of edge left. So any wider seat post, it wouldn't have actually fit in the hole. Yeah, so I got the seat post, got this. This was my second attempt, because the first attempt, I didn't account for like tolerances in the hole in the 3D print. So I made the inner diameter of this circle, it's hard to show now, the inner diameter of this circle on the 3D print was the exact same as the outer diameter of this, so it didn't really fit properly. But long story short, it didn't work. We tried sanding it down, and it just wasn't going to work. So I redid it again, got it 3D printed again with the tolerances, and I got this, which even so, I did have to sand down a little bit just to get the shaping just right. But yeah, slid that into the frame, slid the seat post in, all seemed to work pretty well, fit well, clamped it up. It wasn't really moving anywhere, except the seat post was moving within the 3D print. So what did we do? Well, we fixed it with glue.
Flex tape!
Yeah, so we bonded that with some 2-part epoxy. And that's not moving anywhere anytime soon. And yeah, this is the final product. Inline seat post. It worked really well. It didn't slip once. I used fiber grip just to be safe, because obviously, well, when I first used it, the problem is if it slips even like a tiny bit below the clamp, all of a sudden the clamp's not on anything because it hasn't got any more of this above the clamp. I made it flush with the clamp. So if it slips a little bit, it's all of a sudden on nothing, and then it would go all the way, and this would just slam through the carbon at the bottom and break the frame. And if I wrote it off the frame because I made my own seat post, that's not going to go down well. That would really be really bad. So I planned to saw off this excess, but didn't actually get around to it. Well, because I stopped using the seat post, that's why. But yeah, it worked really well. And the only problem was it looked a little bit bad, because you have this aero-ish bike with thickish tubes, and then you've got this little thin seat post coming out. I'll just put a picture on. It didn't look natural. But I mean, to me, I was like, this is the best thing ever. I figured it out, and I was allowed to use it for my home races. So if I was racing a local crit or any Nat B or whatever, I was allowed to use it there. And literally the first race I used it, I got my best Nat B result. And then yeah, I just started performing a lot better because I was in a position that I was more used to. And then the bad thing came. So I went to my first Prem of the year, first Nat A road race. Went to that, and it turned out I wasn't allowed to use it whilst I was racing with the team. So I went from my nice position that I just got comfortable with and I was happy again, to a saddle that was 4 centimeters further back, and I got spatified. Absolutely, I got dropped. I got dropped so hard. It was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing, and I was so upset. And I didn't actually get to race any more Prems that year, so kind of ruined it for myself there. Anyway, yeah, if I was doing it again, I would do one of two things. I would either add a part of the 3D print that flares out over the top just as a cap so it can't go further down, or even simpler, I could just get an extra seat post clamp and just put that around there to block it. But obviously a cap on the 3D print would be a lot better, but harder to do, I guess. I don't really have a lot of experience with 3D modeling. I just sort of, a couple of YouTube tutorials, figure it out pretty easily. I mean, extruding a shape and putting a notch in it and putting a hole in it, it's not the hardest thing in the world. So I figured it out pretty quickly. But adding other stuff, I'd actually have to learn how to use Blender properly. And yeah, I just wanted a quick solution because I was getting pretty frustrated. Anyway, that's a story of how I manufactured my own seat post my own inline seat post for an aero bike. Yeah, there's not really much to add. If you like these sort of story time videos, they're pretty easy for me to do, so I hope you do like them. If you like them, let me know in the comments. And if you want, and I don't know, if you guys have any questions about like experiences of any sort of type, I don't know, cycling, whatever, ask me. And that's going to be the end of the video. Thanks for watching.